Good morning, everyone. Today is Halloween. Super excited. So we started a new series last week. I'm Pastor Matt, by the way. Sorry, I should have introduced myself. We are here at SFC, Silent Force Church. And last week, if you joined us, we started a series on the book of Ephesians. But like I told you, we are going to go ahead and put a pause on that just this week. Because it's Halloween, I wanted to take some time and really talk about where do our Halloween traditions come from? Because every Halloween, we all see the posts on social media about, good Christians don't celebrate Halloween and it's Satan's birthday and it's all based on pagan rituals and stuff. Okay, so we're going to talk about it. There's a lot of misinformation that goes around, even from Christians and from atheists, actually. Very educated, well-meaning people, and sometimes not so well-meaning, that don't really have all the facts. So we're going to discuss that today. It's going to be super fun. I even have my Harry Potter mug, a little color-changing mug. That's just happy coincidence. I just grabbed it out of the cabinet. So fun times. So I wanted to give you a little more information on myself as well. One of my side hustles I have, I guess my only side hustle, one of them, is soap making. So I do make and sell bar soaps. Look like this. This is a batch I made for a customer. It's eucalyptus. It smells really good. It has little green specks on top. So that one turned out pretty well. This is another one I make. It's kind of fun for Halloween. It's black and orange. It is scented with what's called bonfire. It's kind of a woodsy rum smell. Doesn't smell like a campfire, but that's okay. So those are super fun to make, and I have a friend that wants me to make more for this weekend, but she gave me a list of like 6 different fragrances to make, and that's a lot. So I need to get started on that in the next couple days. It's a little late in the day today to do it, so let's move on. Anyway, that's a side hustle of mine, is soap making. It's pretty cool. It's a fun project. So, Halloween, All Hallows Eve. Halloween being stated or classified as a pagan holiday didn't actually start till the 19th century, it turns out, in Christendom, and it's a myth. So we'll kind of look at why that is. The name comes from the term All Hallows Eve, and it's actually a reference to All Saints' Day, which is a Catholic holiday on November 1st. And they do sometimes sell, I put the phrase in here. Let's see if I can find it in my notes. All Hallowtide, all one word, is October 31st to November 2nd. All Saints' Day is on the 1st. All Souls' Day is on the 2nd of November. And then on October 31st, that is All Hallows Eve. And that's a Catholic thing. I shouldn't say Catholic thing, that sounds rude. It's a Catholic tradition for many, many centuries now. Just like Christmas Eve, it's common to celebrate All Saints' Eve. So All Saints is on the 1st, and Halloween is the eve of that day, right? Eve vigils are very commonplace in Christian history, just like candlelight vigils are common in a lot of Protestant churches on Christmas Eve, Easter Eve, things like that. So celebrating the day before a holiday to take time to really spend time with God is pretty common, even today in the church. So All Saints' Day is a commemoration of believers who've passed on. Some branches of Christianity celebrate specific saints that have passed on, that are sainted by the Catholic Church. In Protestantism, we would say, even like last week, we looked at the word saints. In Protestantism, is believers, all Christians, and that's celebrated. It's with a vigil. So holding vigils for martyred saints is very, very old, and it actually dates back to Polycarp in about 200 AD. If you don't know who Polycarp is, I recommend you go look him up. He's one of the church fathers. At some point, Pope Gregory III dedicated a chapel in St. Peter's to all saints and martyrs, and some believe that is the origin of All Saints' Day being held on November 1st, We're not really positive about that specifically, but it's pretty good. It's better than, or it's just as good as any theory, I should say. We see little to no historical evidence of pagan or Celtic influence on choosing that date, and actually holding vigils in different parts of Europe for holy people or saints in different cultures was held on different days. It wasn't really standardized at that point. So the earliest Irish celebration we have, so we're talking about Celtic traditions, right? Because in this myth of Halloween, we always hear that Halloween is a holdover celebration from ancient Celtic Druid sacrifices and rituals on October 31st, and so all of our traditions come from that. So that's not true. But we do see, let's see, a recording. The earliest Irish celebration we have record of for All Saints' Day is actually on April 20th rather than November 1st. So like I said, it was celebrated in different parts of the world at different times, even in the Catholic Church. So we do see an early Irish reference to what we call Samhain. So it's spelled Samhain. That's spelled, have the word colloquial stuck in my head, phonetically. Spelled phonetically as Samhain, it's pronounced Samhain. And that's the same day we're looking at in Irish culture is Samhain. And there is an early Irish reference to Samhain, which mentions the celebration of 3 local holy men and having a vigil for them. That's a very old Irish reference, but it's kind of one of the early writings where we see the word Samhain. And a lot of people mistakenly say, the Druid celebration of Samhain was a pagan holiday, and it was on the 31st of October, and so that's why we celebrate Halloween on that date, and it's not true. So let's dig a little deeper. There is some evidence that November 1st was a key date for several Celtic cultures, using the term Samhain to refer to the end of summer and the beginning of harvest. So in ancient Irish, Scottish, we call it that whole culture, we tend to group as all Celtic. They are a little distinct, but for the sake of simplicity, we'll say the Celtic peoples in those areas. We do see them using the term Samhain to refer to the end of summer, and there is some studies done on the word itself that show it actually means like the end of summer. Summer when is the end of, kind of a little bit. So that term specifically was used by the Celts to talk about the end of summer and beginning of harvest, right before winter. We do not, however, see any historical connections between this time of year and religious rituals or practices. Whenever we see references to Samhain being kind of celebrated as the end of summer, it was a time of feasting and celebration before winter set in, had no religious significance. We have no evidence of any rituals or practices like that, or witchcraft of any kind. We do see a very small amount of evidence that people would celebrate and have feasts during that time in that part of the world. So it isn't until the 12th century that we find something supernatural associated with Samhain, and that was a little story in a book. And in that story, there's a reference about the fairy world being open to the mundane world on Samhain, and so men would go out to woo fairy women. And it's just a story. It's not a historical document or anything in that sense. It's not meant to be fact. It's just a story. But we really see no overtly what we would call pagan references to Samhain at that point. People often cite Geoffrey Keating. He was a priest in 1634, and he's one of the first ones to connect Samhain to ritual sacrifice by pagan cultures. So we use the word pagan to specifically group everyone who's not Christian. I should define that term. And that is a very broad term, but that's okay. That's the term that's often used. So, however, historically, Keating, this Geoffrey Keating, who wrote about the pagan rituals on Samhain, he's considered extremely unreliable as a source for history, and his writings are actually seen as pretty much pure fantasy on his part. So they have no academic value in that regard. So there was a book written by James Frazer. It was published in 1890. It's called The Golden Bough, and it had a huge influence on culture's view of Samhain and influenced many people, including Freud. Um, However, so in it, Frazer claims that Samhain is a pagan feast of the dead. To celebrate the dead, rather, is a better way to say that, pagan feast. However, we see that many European cultures celebrated their dead on different days. Like I said earlier, different cultures would have a day, kind of like a Spanish Day of the Dead is unique to that culture and very vibrant. Other cultures have celebrated their dead, or the Catholic Church in different areas, like I said, would celebrate and hold vigils for dead saints and martyrs at different times of the year depending on their culture. So, this book by James Frazer made the connection between the supernatural and Samhain commonplace. It was actually in 2 volumes. He wrote it, and many, many people read it and ran with it. So we see that just spread out from there, that the connection between witchcraft and the supernatural and Samhain. So another tradition that's considered pagan is Halloween fires or harvest fires, because people would build bonfires during Samhain or during All Saints Day or All Hallows Eve as a vigil. And it was a tradition all over Europe, actually, to build fires and watch them burn down. That was, in a lot of areas, that was the tradition. They would watch the fire burn down as they remembered dead saints. So this is a Catholic tradition, and a lot of this was Catholic influenced. It would be very meditative. As the fire would burn down, they would remember their lost loved ones, saints and holy people that have been lost or martyred, and you would watch the fire burn down. So that was actually very common. However, after the Reformation, Protestant movements discouraged this tradition because it was Catholic. So, we see the Protestant movement starting after that saying, "Oh, no, we don't want to build these All Hallows Eve fires to watch them burn down and celebrate our dead or martyrs or anything like that. That's a Catholic thing. That's not a Protestant thing." And so there was a lot of hate associated with that, and you can easily see how hate for pagan nations was also looped in it, because they're like, oh, we see, the Celtic cultures over here maybe having bonfires for the end of summer as a tradition in their country, and the Catholics are doing it over here for All Saints Day, and we're not going to have a part of any of that. So the Protestants very much deformed that. So during All Hallowtide is the phrase we've been using for those 3 days, October 31st, November 1st, and 2nd. During that time, during those 3 days, it became Catholic tradition to distribute food and treats to the poor as a way to remember the saints, remember the martyrs, remember our dead ancestors. They would distribute treats and food to the poor, even little things called soul cakes. It became traditional for poor people to disguise themselves during that time or wrap themselves and go door to door asking for food or begging for soul cakes. It became a tradition. So this tradition varies widely by area, but some of the common ideas were all the same. So the threat of damage or violence if the person didn't receive food became a common part of the game. So it became like a game and a tradition, and so they would jokingly threaten damage or violence to the person's home if they didn't give them treats. Does that sound familiar? Trick or treat, right? That's where that comes from. As kids are saying trick or treat, if you don't give them any candy, they're gonna, pull a trick on you or pull a prank on you. That's where that comes from, is this Catholic tradition, actually. It's very clearly a precursor to trick or treating as a Halloween tradition. So these geysers is what they were called. These are in disguise. These geysers would commonly carry vegetables like gourds or squashes, carved with faces with candles in them, as they went from door to door as a lantern. So that became part of the tradition as well, as having carved vegetables as lanterns to light their way. So, yes, trick-or-treating, costumes, and jack-o'-lanterns all clearly come from those traditions that were very Christian in origin. It was about giving out food to the poor, and it was 100% a Catholic tradition. So the connection of November 1st to All Saints' Day and Samhain practices specifically. So we have All Saints' Day is a time to mourn the loss of martyrs and your loved ones in Catholic tradition. And then Samhain is a time for Celtic cultures to celebrate the end of summer and the beginning of harvest. Them coinciding right around November 1st, purely coincidental. The Catholic Church did not steal that date and Christianize it. That's another myth that we hear, is all of our holidays are stolen pagan holidays from by Christians and sanitized. It's largely false, almost always false. But this is a prime example of that. So the Catholic Church did not just run around and steal pagan holidays and sanitize them. That's a myth. When you really start digging into the history, you see that's not true. So everything else in modern Halloween, as we celebrate it today, is based on those traditions that were brought over from Europe. But we also started having these American traditions of, during that time, the veil is thin. There was this idea that, as we hold a candlelight vigil for the dead, they see that and they are with us. And so your family is always with you during that time, kind of thing, spiritually speaking. There's no biblical basis for that. But you can see how that starts breeding this idea of the veil between the living and dead being thin during those times. And as we saw, there are a couple Celtic stories over the years that they talk about the fairies in Europe, and the fairy world is the veil is thin between our world and their world during Samhain. Those are just kind of traditional stories. But as we come into American culture, things like the veil being thin, the dead visiting us, witchcraft, magic, witches, and using candy, giving out candy instead of like food, it's all a direct consequence of American capitalism, actually. And I shouldn't say purely capitalism, American culture. It's very much an American culture. We love holidays. We love any excuse to celebrate. And we especially see this right after the Second World War. And all of that, kind of what we call the modern American Halloween traditions, are purely colloquial. They have some roots back in Catholic traditions. But we very much made it our own. Costumes, trick-or-treating, all of it, jack-o'-lanterns, even, scary movies, all that kind of stuff is very American. Other parts of the world have adopted Halloween as a holiday, but it really is very American in origin that way. So Halloween origins, to kind of tie this up, this is actually going to be a little bit shorter message than usual, so forgive me for that. We covered all of our points. So Halloween origins are actually completely Christian in nature. Largely. We see a little bit of influence from Samhain, pretty much none. There's really, Samhain is a time of celebrating the end of summer. That's it. Historically. All of our traditions that we take into Halloween, like I said, are Catholic. And they've been adopted by modern America in about the last 100 years to fit into our unique culture as Americans. And we kind of ran with it after that. So whether you celebrate Halloween as a time to remember the dead and to cherish, your memories of your loved ones, or you celebrate Halloween as a time to party with your loved ones, or participate in spooky activities, bobbing for apples, costume contests, trick or treating, all of that stuff. It is not connected to overt sin or paganism or Satanism or witchcraft, and it's perfectly okay for Christians to partake in that. If you would like to partake in those things, that's okay. If you would rather not, that's okay too. We have liberty in Christ in that. We have freedom in that. But don't shy away from Halloween as a celebration just because you think it's a pagan holiday. It's actually not true. So, people use Halloween as an excuse to do some very awful, dark things, and this time of year is now connected to a lot of pagan religious systems or Wiccan religious systems, and those are two different things. But that is not why we celebrate Halloween today in America. It's just not. We celebrate spooky things because it's tradition. It's an excuse to party, see our loved ones, dress up. Different people will dress up because they like the chance to be someone or something they're not. Some people like to dress scary, and that's all okay. It's okay to participate in those things if you want. It's not sinful to do that. Now, if you do sinful things during that time, use an excuse to commit adultery, okay, well, that's a sin, but it has nothing to do with Halloween. So, I encourage you actually to take this time to celebrate. Finding reasons to celebrate and be around loved ones is a good thing and a Christian thing. That has a biblical basis. It is finding reasons to celebrate and have joy with one another, whether it's people at church, people in your family. So I encourage that. Use this as an excuse. If you are still a little sketchy about it, use this as an excuse to have people over for a soup potluck or a costume contest or, things like that. But we don't need to shy away from the Halloween as it is because we think it's not Christian. It's completely false. So I do encourage that in your communities. So that is my message for today. And if you've noticed, I have a screen set up back here now, finally, so that I have a nice white background, even if it's a little wavy. That's okay. I don't care so much about that. It doesn't need to be perfectly flat. I also installed some soundproofing, so hopefully this is better on the sound. Had a little bit of trouble with some background noise, so I also did the lighting a little bit differently today. It's a little dimmer, and after post-production it may not seem as dim, but I thought, hey, it's Halloween, why not have a little bit of spooky lighting while we're at it. And I meant to have, I've been racking my brain for some kind of costume to wear, or I have my cowboy hat, I could have wore that, but that's okay. It's just good Halloween fun. Most of our Halloween traditions are actually extremely wholesome. Carving pumpkins with your family, trick-or-treating with your little ones is actually very wholesome and brings joy to God. I'm pretty confident in saying that. So let me go ahead and pray for us, and we'll be done for the day. Father God, thank you so much for the time that we have, even just a half an hour on Sundays, to learn about you, to learn about our world, our traditions, to learn about the church, and time to spend with one another. I praise you for that. Jesus, come and teach us something new today and this week. I pray for blessings and joy on this Halloween for everyone listening, that it would be a good day and that they would find love and joy in it. So I pray for safety for everyone this week. And I thank you so much for all that you do for us, Jesus. In your name, amen. All right, so come back next week. We are doing chapter 2 of Ephesians. It is going to be a good time. It's going to be a good study. So come on back, and we will see you here.